Please be seated. Well, good morning again. I wanted to point out that we have a timeline here, but one of the things I wanted to say, I wanted to make sure that we all realize is, yes, I've been here for 30 years, but we as a congregation and a pastor have put up with each other together for 30 years. So this is not just about me, this is about all of us. This is our celebration, not mine, because we wouldn't have been here together for 30 years if I were missing or some of you were missing. So I want us to say happy anniversary to all of us. Happy anniversary to all of us. And you've got your pearls because Hallmark says 30 years is a pearl anniversary. So that's why we all have pearls. And if you didn't get some, we'll make sure you have them. We have plenty. And then over here is a timeline. And you notice it's not finished. And the top is 189 plus years going out to 200 with 3 dots after that. This congregation was founded 189 years ago by Bishop Jackson Kemper, whose window is the one on this side of the doors at the bottom. You look at him as you go out the door. And then this bottom one, if you think about a map that has a little circle that says, see this, and here's the big piece, the bottom one is 30 years. There's an inch a year at the top. There are 9 inches a year for each year at the bottom. But as you see, that's not finished, and that's because John Hahn and I could not get it done. However, we have the timeline pieces, 9 inches apiece, and we have the years, and what we've got up now are just the decades for 30 years, 1995, 2005, 2015, 2025. We also have a bunch of pictures that people have brought that need to be put up. And so we're going to build this timeline over time. Because as you think about things, you're going to remember this is what happened then, or here's a picture that came from that confirmation class then. And so we're going to build this timeline together. Also over here, you can see the tree has returned. And the tree has returned, it's got spiritual gifts on it, but it's also going to be, we talked about last week that we're going to ask you to write briefly or draw a picture of your favorite tree at Trinity Church and why. And those are going to go on this tree. So we're going to keep building these two things as time goes on. So that's what we've got here. 189 years and counting, and 30 years, 1995 to 2025. The gospel this morning is one of my favorites. It's also the first time I preached this gospel, on this gospel, was when I was a senior in seminary. Everybody has to do a senior sermon. And the last day to do a senior sermon was Friday of Easter week, and this is the lesson, the gospel for Friday of Easter week, or Easter Friday, and I was the last senior to preach. So those of you who wonder about my doing things at the last minute, I've been doing that for years. But there were some things I noticed about that gospel then that I continue to notice and reflect on, I have continued to notice and reflect on for the last 41 years. One of those things is that the disciples are really glum. They're at loose ends. And we might say to them, yes, Jesus died, but he was resurrected, and he's been to see you twice, so what's your problem? Get over it already. That's really asking a lot for people whose lives have been turned completely upside down. For the last 3 years in John's gospel, they've been following Jesus around. He dies, he's buried, he comes back. in an upper room. He comes back again a week later. And now they're no longer in Jerusalem, they're in Galilee. And they really have no idea what to do with themselves, and they are still grieving, and they're going to keep doing that for quite some time. So Peter, as an active guy, and he says, all right, everybody, I'm going fishing. I'm going to go do something I know how to do. I know how it works. How many of you, when you're really feeling upset about something, find something that you know how to do, and you know how to do it well, and you go do it? It takes your minds off things. It helps focus you. So everybody else says, okay, we'll go with you. So they go out in the boat, and these expert fishermen, of which there are at least 4, because there's Peter and James and John, and I think there was Andrew, but anyway, the expert fisher folk are not catching any fish. And then there's this guy on the shore as dawn is breaking, and he calls out to them, you don't have any fish, do you? Now, how would that feel if you were... No, we don't. And then proceeds to give advice from the shore, directions. Says, put the net out on the right side of the boat. So they put the net out on the right side of the boat, whichever side that is, and lo and behold, they have a huge catch of fish immediately, and it's so heavy they can't even haul it into the boat. And the beloved disciple is on the boat, and he says, it is the Lord. And Peter, when he realizes it's Jesus on the shore, Peter's stark naked fishing, and he puts on clothes, and then he leaps into the water and swims to shore, and then I think of him as giving Jesus a big wet hug right there on the beach. The rest of them come more sedately with the fish and the boat, and when they get there, Jesus says, I need some more fish. You get me a couple of fish. What does Peter do? He goes to the boat and he hauls the entire net of fish, all 153 of them. Now, I don't know the significance of 153, except that I think it's 31 times. Never mind. It goes in, three goes into it 31 times. So 3 is significant always. Anyway, 153 fish. Jesus feeds them bread and fish. Where else did he do that? Feeding of the 5,000, remember? 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Now they're having bread and fish on the beach. They're having a nice picnic breakfast. And then Jesus looks at Peter and he says, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord, you know I love you. And then Jesus says, tend my lambs. Then Jesus keeps looking at Peter and he says to Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, yes, you know I love you. And Jesus says, he said, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. And then he asked a third time. And Peter gets his feelings hurt. And he says, yes, Lord, you know I love you. You know everything. And Jesus says, feed my sheep. So the first response is, feed my lambs. The second one is tend my sheep. The third one is feed my sheep. And then there's this whole thing about when Peter ages. But they've been at loose ends, remember? Their world's been turned upside down. They've tried to do what they know how to do, which is fish, and that didn't work out so well without the help from the carpenter on the shore. What they're supposed to do now is feed sheep, feed lambs, tend sheep. They have a whole new vocation. It's not fishing anymore. And Jesus is telling them what they need to do next. And who are the sheep and the lambs that they're supposed to tend and feed? Well, that ultimately is, we are those people, ultimately, but they have to do that by working with the people around them. The other thing we know in this story is that the beloved disciple and Peter are continuing their little rivalry that we saw them when they ran to the empty tomb. When Mary Magdalene told them the tomb was empty, they started a foot race. And the beloved disciple got there first, but Peter went in the tomb first, into the cave. And then the beloved disciple recognizes who Jesus is, but Peter's the one that leaps in the water and goes to him. we need to be aware that both the beloved disciple and Peter are representing aspects of our spiritual lives and our relationship with Jesus Christ. The beloved disciple tends to be, I guess you could say, more observant, more contemplative, more thoughtful, and Peter is more active. He's impetuous, as a matter of fact. He leaps up, he gets things right, and then he gets them wrong, and he's been doing that all through all the Gospels. But right here, we need both the aspects of the beloved disciple and the aspects of Peter, the contemplative and the active, the thoughtful and the essentially impetuous. We need both to be those as part of who we are in our spiritual journey as Christians, doing what Jesus told Peter to do, tending lambs and feeding lambs and sheep, tending lambs and sheep. We need to be doing that also. The other thing about this story that I noticed then, and I'm still noticing, and that I've actually already said, is that a relationship with Jesus turns everything upside down. That's happened to these disciples now several times, and here it is happening again. And it's not just that this beloved person of theirs has died and been resurrected, but it's also that they are no longer going to be doing what they've always done. They now have to do something different. And the experience of the church from then until now is that Jesus turns things upside down and keeps calling us to tend sheep and lambs, keeps calling us to follow him, the last words he said to Peter right there, follow me, and keeps challenging us to figure out what that means now. I think about our last 30 years together. We've had ups and downs and all kinds of, but every time we encounter Jesus, things get turned upside down. The way in which we expect that we're going to do something changes. And that's really important. And our ongoing job is always out there. Feed the sheep, tend the sheep, feed the lambs. How we do that is part of our Christian journey, and we need to be able to be both thoughtful and impetuous. We need to be reflective and active to do the work we're called to do. And the work goes on. It started long before we got here, and it will continue long before we're gone, long after we're gone. And in the meantime, we can celebrate 30 years, and we know that going forward, this parish is going to keep going, and I'm going to keep going, but we're not going to do that journey any longer together. I like to think I'm better for having shared this past 30 years with you. I hope you think you're better for having shared it with me. But the gift that we're given when Jesus asks Peter, do you love me? And the answer is, you know that I love you. Jesus asks us that all the time. And our answer is, yes. And now what are we supposed to do? Amen.